Hello and welcome again to Science Fiction Quest. I'm your host, TJ. As I told you in my first video, I started NaNoWriMo. It's going good. I'm up to close to 17,000 words, so I'm well on my way to getting it done, getting to 50,000 words in this month. My novel, Another Boring Day in Space, is coming along fine. I have my protagonist in a lot of trouble. So in general, it's going pretty good. I started with him waking up because it's, as I found out, it's a cliche. It's been overdone, and as I understand it, most people don't want to hear about people waking up and finding themselves in trouble. So it was just one of those things where there's a knock on the door and stuff happens. Right now I'm having a little bit of trouble writing it all because I have a ton of dialogue and not very much narrative. I find places where it's going good, it's nice, the pace is what I wanted, which is quick, and there's a lot of pressure on the character, and I think it's projecting well. But if all of it is dialogue, I lose a lot of the ambiance. So I'm using a first-person point of view, so that also makes it a little bit difficult for me as a writer to get the world around them presented to the reader. I've been working with the NaNoWriMo website, updating my word count every day. That hasn't gone over really well. There's these badges you get for accomplishments. So 2 days in a row, updating your word count, and when you reach 5,000 words, when you reach 10,000 words, all of that kind of stuff. It's not really all that agile. I don't know if it's just too many of us working at the same time, but whatever it is, it's not really a friendly site. I hope they get it better because the idea is fantastic. The idea of having a National Novel Writing Month, great idea, really good, kudos. They really should try to make the website a lot friendlier. The forums are very good. I've only read some things. I haven't participated. I don't feel qualified yet, but working on it. Okay, let's talk gravity, because this is, after all, sci-fi quest. It's not NaNoWriMo. So gravity is very important in the sense, not gravitas, gravity. The force that keeps us with our feet on the ground. It's very important because any kind of space travel requires that we do some work with this. Science fiction is very rich in its approach to artificial gravity. We know for a fact that as soon as we leave the planet, we start floating around. There's nothing to hold us down to the ground. In fact, the very idea of ground gets dispersed. Take a look, for example, at the International Space Station. If you look at any of the images available for it, you'll see that all the surfaces are used. Everything is used, either as storage or for equipment or whatever, but all of it is used. That's because you don't need somewhere to walk on, because there's no way to walk on it. You have the exercise equipment for the astronauts. They tie themselves down and that kind of stuff. But that's not gravity by any stretch of the imagination. So you have the 1950s serials, Buck Rogers and all those guys. And gravity just happened. It was something that was implied. They didn't try to explain how they got there, none of that stuff. Some of them, especially in the early 60s, they were more adventurous with their explanations. So they had people put on magnetic boots. And then the magnetic boots would hold you on top of the aircraft or a spaceship and that kind of stuff, which is a great idea, but still not gravity. You're using magnetic boots to attach you to the ship. So you don't feel gravity, you just don't float away, which of course is important, don't get me wrong. Then you have field generators and graviton generators. And of course, the gravity field generators, you have Gene Roddenberry's Andromeda, for example, that it allows for gravity inside of the ship, and at the same time, Andromeda, the ship, only weighs about 1 kilogram. So their engines are a lot more effective, not because they're better, but because the ship is lighter. In other words, it has to do with the mass of what they are working with. So the gravity field generator, for all practical intents and purposes, create the illusion that the floor is on top of a massive body, such as a planet, while for the engines, the ship is this little tiny 1 kilogram thing. So great idea. Doesn't go into the scientific details of it, just trust me, it works kind of thing. So that's pretty good. Then you have graviton generators and some other stories. The graviton would be a particle that carries gravity, pretty much like a photon carries light. But that's a little bit more complicated. And then, of course, you have gravity plating. Gravity plating is very popular. You probably have heard it because it's in Star Trek. And they use it for everything. Cisco even used it. Cisco in Deep Space Nine. He even used it as a weapon. So gravity plating sounds like a great idea. If you take a look at the gravity plating in Star Trek, I mean, I'm not going to go into a lot of it right now, but it's kind of peculiar because inside of the ship it works, but as soon as you get out of the ship, it doesn't work anymore. When Picard and the group are fighting the Klingons on top of the Enterprise, they're in a space environment, so their boots have to stick to the ship and that kind of stuff. So the gravity effect of the gravity plating is only about 6 feet, maybe 8 feet high, and then from then on, which would be the next deck or the outside of the ship, it doesn't affect it anymore. That's peculiar because then you have to have plating with a very limited reach, because if you have decks one on top of the other and you have 1G in each deck, then either it only goes up to the next deck, or, which would be a really interesting situation, you get gravities on top of gravities on top of gravities. I mean, the whole thing is a nice thought exercise. And then you have in Enterprise, you have the helmsman talk to the head engineer about finding the sweet spot on the ship so they can sit on the roof, which really doesn't make any sense because you're either 0G and there's no up and down, or there is an up and down and you're sitting down looking up, independent of what the room looks like. So the fact that they switched the camera upside down, they wouldn't perceive it that way. They would either perceive zero gravity, or they would perceive one gravity the other way around. I know, confusing. But take a look at the show. It's kind of interesting. I'll try to leave a link below. So the other way to generate artificial gravity would be by centrifugal force. Sorry about that. What that means is you'd have a circular or cylindrical ship and you'd have it spinning. Either way, doesn't matter which way it spins. Point is, though, that it's got to be fast enough so that the centrifugal force is equal to a 1g, or close enough for you not to notice. That's what they use, for example, in Ringworld, 2001 Space Odyssey, Babylon 5, even the Martian uses it. And some of the Red Planet also uses that idea. The thing of it is, though, it would not be a circle. It would not be the bicycle tire shaped space station. It would be a cylinder, because you need surface to work on. So you'd be standing on the inside of a long cylinder, and then that would make sense, which is essentially what Babylon 5 did. So that's a good idea. There's a lot of variables that you have to keep in mind. You have to make sure that it's big enough so that the spin is imperceptible to the person experiencing the artificial gravity force. If it's too small, you'll feel it and it doesn't do you very much good. Plus the fact that then you'd have a gravity differential between your feet and your head. So the radius has to be large enough, and the longer the radius, or rather the higher the number of the radius, then the slower the spin can be, and that's also beneficial. Essentially, because of the Coriolis effect, if you have something that's spinning, the perfect example here is a rifle bullet. Rifle bullets are spinning, so a sniper that it's shooting from a long distance has to take into account that the spin of the bullet is going to make it turn either one way or the other, depending on the spin that's put on it by the rifling inside of the weapon. Now, that applies to a ship. If the ship is moving in a circular motion to create this artificial gravity, it's also going to put, the very spin is going to put a Coriolis effect movement, and it's going to veer either one way or the other. People who play golf are very familiar with this. They can slice the ball because when they hit it, the spin of the ball, instead of being forward, it's to one side, and that makes the ball take a different trajectory from the one you want. So all of these things considered, that's still the kind of artificial gravity that we could make right now with our actual technology. So what do I use in another boring day in space? Well, I'm using ArtGrav. ArtGrav is simply artificial gravity. Because of the nature of the book, it's relatively short. I'm not going to go into the explanations as to the whys and the hows. I'm just putting in that it is a method to generate artificial gravity, that you can turn it off, especially in the airlock. And there I go into a little flight of fancy. We're all familiar. We are all blah 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 blah. We're all familiar with the Mile High Club, which is people having sex in a plane. Of course, if you're in a spaceship, everybody is over a mile high from Earth. So zero gravity would be the next frontier. Let's use that. So I'm just making it so the only practical place to have zero G is in the airlocks, because the rest of the ship you cannot mess with the gravity. But you can in the airlocks for an obvious reason. If you're in an airlock and you have to go out of the ship, you want to be able to make the gravity go to zero so you can float out and then float back in. Evidently, I'm not putting anything that generates gravity on the outside of the ship that would make you stick to it, for a very simple reason. If you're traveling through a asteroid-rich area, you would create an asteroid shower on your ship just because you have gravity outside of it. So you don't want that. And that's pretty much it. The rest of it, I'll let you know on the next installment. I very much appreciate your taking your time to take a look at this. If you like the shirt, it's in my TeePublic and Redbubble store. And I'll see you next time. Keep questing.